Her humble waitress risked everything to save a billionaire CEO during a violent robbery. The very next morning, 4 black SUVs pulled up outside her tiny diner. What city are you in? Drop it below and subscribe. Here comes an emotional story with a finale you won't believe. The fluorescent lights of Rosie's diner flickered twice before steadying, casting their familiar pale glow across the worn linoleum floor. Christina wiped down the counter for what felt like the 100th time that night, her reflection ghosting back at her from the chrome napkin dispenser. At 26, she had spent the last 4 years working the late shift at this tiny establishment on the outskirts of Chicago, serving coffee and pie to truckers, insomniacs, and the occasional lost soul seeking refuge from the cold. The bell above the door chimed at 11:43. Christina looked up from her cleaning, ready to deliver her standard greeting, but the words caught in her throat. The man who walked in was unlike any customer she had ever seen at Rosie's. He wore a charcoal grey suit that probably cost more than her annual salary. His dark hair slightly disheveled, as if he had been running his fingers through it repeatedly. But it was his eyes that struck her most, deep brown, almost black, carrying a weight that seemed far too heavy for someone who appeared to be in his mid-30s. "Kitchen's about to close," she said, finding her voice, "but I can still get you coffee and whatever's left in the pie case." He slid onto a stool at the counter, loosening his tie with practiced fingers. "Coffee, black, and whatever pie you recommend." Christina poured the coffee, studying him from the corner of her eye. His jaw was clenched tight, and she noticed his hands trembling slightly as he wrapped them around the mug. "Rough night." A bitter laugh escaped him. "You could say that. I just found out my CFO has been embezzling from my company for the past 3 years. $12 million gone, along with my trust in humanity." She set a slice of cherry pie in front of him. "That's a lot of money to lose in one night." "The money I can recover. It's the betrayal that stings." He took a bite of the pie, and something shifted in his expression. "This is actually incredible." "Martha, she's the owner. She makes everything from scratch. Been using the same recipes for 40 years. Christina leaned against the counter, something about this stranger making her want to linger. "I'm Christina, by the way." "Alexander," he replied, and she noticed he didn't offer a last name. "Alexander Chen." She had no idea who Alexander Chen was, but something told her she should. The way he carried himself, the expensive watch glinting on his wrist, the casual mention of $12 million as if it were pocket change, all of it painted a picture of a world she had never inhabited. The diner was empty except for old Roy in his usual booth, nursing his decaf and reading yesterday's newspaper. The cook had already gone home, leaving Christina to handle the last hour alone. It was a routine she knew well, one she had performed countless times without incident. That routine was about to be shattered. The door burst open at midnight, the bell clanging violently against the glass. 2 men stormed in, their faces covered with ski masks, guns raised and ready. Christina's blood turned to ice in her veins. "Everyone on the ground, now!" The larger of the 2 men swept his weapon across the room. His voice was rough, desperate, the voice of someone with nothing left to lose. Old Roy dropped his newspaper, his arthritic hands shaking as he lowered himself to the floor. Alexander started to move, but the second robber was on him instantly, pressing the barrel of his gun against the back of his head. "Stay right where you are, pretty boy. I know who you are. Alexander Chen, CEO of Nexus Technologies. You're worth what? 2 billion? 3? The man laughed, a sound that sent chills down Christina's spine. This was supposed to be a simple register job, but looks like we hit the jackpot. Christina's mind raced. She had dealt with difficult customers before, with drunks and occasional troublemakers, but nothing like this. Her hand found the counter behind her, fingers brushing against the handle of the coffee pot, still hot from the fresh brew. "Open the register," the first robber demanded, advancing toward her. "And don't try anything stupid." Her hands trembled as she punched in the code, the drawer sliding open to reveal a pitiful collection of bills. Maybe $200 on a good night. The robber snatched the money, cursing under his breath. "This is it? This is all you've got?" He grabbed Christina by the arm, yanking her closer. She could smell cigarettes and desperation on his breath. "Where's the safe?" "There isn't one," she managed to say, her voice steadier than she felt. Martha doesn't trust banks. She deposits everything at the end of each shift. She's lying, the second robber said, still holding Alexander at gunpoint. They always have a safe. He pressed the gun harder against Alexander's temple, and Christina saw the CEO's jaw tighten. Maybe if I put a bullet in this billionaire's head, you'll remember where it is. What happened next unfolded in a matter of seconds, though it would replay in Christina's memory in slow motion for years to come. She grabbed the coffee pot and hurled the scalding contents at the first robber's face. He screamed, dropping his gun and clawing at his eyes. The second robber turned toward the commotion, his weapon swinging away from Alexander, and Christina launched herself at him. She had no training, no plan, nothing but pure instinct driving her forward. She crashed into him with all her weight, sending them both tumbling to the floor. The gun went off, the shot deafening in the small space, but the bullet lodged harmlessly in the ceiling. Christina felt hands grabbing at her, felt the robber's elbow connect with her ribs, but she held on, fighting with everything she had. Alexander moved with surprising speed for a man in a designer suit. He kicked the gun away from the first robber, who was still writhing on the floor, and turned to help Christina. Together they managed to subdue the second man, just as the sound of sirens filled the air. Someone, old Roy, she would later learn, had triggered the silent alarm hidden beneath his booth. The next few hours were a blur of police statements, flashing lights and concerned faces. Christina was checked by paramedics, who confirmed she had bruised ribs, but nothing broken. The robbers were hauled away in handcuffs, one still moaning about his burned face. And through it all, Alexander Chen stayed by her side. "You saved my life," he said finally, when the chaos had subsided and they stood alone in the parking lot. The first hints of dawn were painting the sky pink and gold. "You didn't even hesitate." Christina shrugged, wincing at the pain in her ribs. "You were a customer. It's my job to take care of the people who come through that door." He stared at her as if she were speaking a foreign language. "I've had security details, bodyguards. People paid handsomely to protect me. Not one of them has ever done what you did tonight." "Maybe they've never had coffee hot enough." She attempted a smile, exhaustion making her punchy. Alexander's expression softened, something warm flickering in those dark eyes. "Can I at least give you a ride home? It's the least I can do." Christina looked at her beat-up Honda Civic, currently sporting a flat tire she hadn't had time to fix. She looked at the sleek black Mercedes that had to be his, parked incongruously among the pickup trucks and minivans. Every instinct told her to decline, to maintain the careful boundaries she had built around her life. But something about this night, about this man, made her want to step outside those boundaries just this once. "Okay," she heard herself say, "but fair warning, I live in a neighborhood where that car of yours might cause a scene." The ride was quiet, both of them lost in their own thoughts. When they pulled up to her modest apartment building, Alexander turned to her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Christina, I don't believe in coincidences. What happened tonight? You being there, you doing what you did. I think it happened for a reason." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, pressing it into her hand. "I'd like to see you again. Not to repay a debt, though I intend to do that too. Just to see you." She looked at the card, heavy cream-colored stock with embossed lettering. Alexander Chen, CEO, Nexus Technologies. Beneath it, a phone number that probably connected to a line very few people had access to. "I work the late shift," she said, "every night except Sunday. Then I'll find you on Sunday." He said it like a promise, like a vow. "Get some rest, Christina, and thank you for everything." She watched his car disappear around the corner, the business card clutched in her hand like a talisman. As she climbed the stairs to her third-floor apartment, she told herself that she would probably never see Alexander Chen again. Men like him didn't belong in worlds like hers. Tomorrow everything would go back to normal. But when she finally fell into bed, exhausted beyond measure, her last thought before sleep claimed her was of deep brown eyes and a promise spoken in the pale light of dawn. She had no idea that in just 12 hours, 4 black SUVs would pull up in front of Rosie's diner and change her life forever. And before we continue, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Leave your city in the comments below, and if you're enjoying this story, please like and subscribe for more. Now, let's see what happens next. Christina woke to the sound of her phone buzzing insistently on the nightstand. She groaned, her ribs protesting as she reached for it. The screen showed a number she didn't recognize, but the events of the previous night made her answer anyway. "Miss Torres?" A woman's voice, professional and crisp. "This is Miranda Walsh, executive assistant to Mr. Alexander Chen. Mr. Chen has requested a meeting with you this afternoon. A car will be sent to your residence at 3 o'clock. Christina blinked at the ceiling, still half asleep. "I'm sorry, what?" "A car will be sent at 3. Mr. Chen asks that you be ready. The dress code is casual. He wants you to be comfortable." Before Christina could respond, the line went dead. She stared at her phone for a long moment, wondering if she had dreamed the entire conversation. But the bruises on her ribs told her that last night had been very real, and apparently, so was Alexander Chen's interest in seeing her again. She spent the next few hours in a state of nervous anticipation, unable to eat more than a few bites of toast. Her closet offered limited options. She owned exactly 2 nice dresses, both purchased at thrift stores for job interviews that had never panned out. She settled on a simple blue sundress that brought out the green in her hazel eyes, paired with the only pair of flats she owned that didn't have scuff marks. At precisely 3 o'clock, a black SUV pulled up in front of her building. Then another, and another, and another. 4 identical vehicles, their windows tinted so dark she couldn't see inside, lined up along the curb like a presidential motorcade. Christina's neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, peered out her window with unconcealed curiosity as Christina descended the stairs. "You in some kind of trouble, honey?" "I honestly have no idea," Christina replied, which was the truth. A man in a dark suit emerged from the lead vehicle, opening the rear door for her. "Miss Torres, I'm James, head of Mr. Chen's security detail. Please make yourself comfortable." The interior of the SUV was unlike anything Christina had ever experienced. Leather seats softer than her own bed, a mini refrigerator stocked with water and champagne, screens embedded in the seatbacks. She felt like she had stepped into another world, one where people casually rode in vehicles that cost more than most houses. The convoy wound through the city streets before turning onto Lakeshore Drive, the Chicago skyline gleaming in the afternoon sun. They passed neighborhoods Christina recognized, then ones she had only seen in magazines and real estate listings. Finally, they pulled through a gated entrance and up a long, winding driveway to a mansion that seemed to stretch endlessly in both directions. Alexander was waiting on the front steps, looking considerably more relaxed than he had the night before. Gone was the rumpled suit, replaced by dark jeans and a simple white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He smiled when he saw her, and something in Christina's chest did a small flip. "You came," he said, as if there had been any doubt. "I sent 4 SUVs. I was afraid of what you'd send if I said no." She meant it as a joke, but something flickered in his eyes. "I'm sorry if it was overwhelming. After last night, I wanted to make sure you were safe." He offered his hand to help her from the vehicle. "I've had my security team doing background checks on everyone even remotely connected to those robbers, just in case." Do billionaires always react this way to diner holdups? This billionaire has never had someone throw scalding coffee at an armed robber to save his life. Alexander led her toward the house, his hand warm at the small of her back. "I told you last night I don't believe in coincidences. I think we were meant to meet, Christina, and I'd like the chance to prove it to you." The mansion's interior was just as impressive as its exterior. Soaring ceilings, museum-quality art on every wall, furniture that looked both priceless and surprisingly inviting. But Alexander didn't linger in the grand rooms. Instead, he led her through a series of hallways to a small, cozy library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a fire crackling in the hearth. "This is my favorite room in the house," he said, gesturing for her to sit on a plush leather sofa. "It's the only one that actually feels like home." Christina sank into the cushions, letting her eyes roam over the book spines. Classic literature, business texts, and, surprisingly, a well-worn collection of comic books on a bottom shelf. "I wouldn't have pegged you for a Batman fan," Alexander laughed, the sound genuine and warm. "My father gave me my first comic when I was 8, said it would teach me about justice and responsibility." His expression softened. "He passed away 2 years ago. Those comics are one of the few things I have left of him." "I'm sorry." Christina meant it. She knew loss intimately, had carried its weight since she was 19 and lost both parents in a car accident. "Thank you." Alexander sat across from her, his dark eyes searching her face. "Christina, I need to be honest with you. I had my team look into your background this morning." She stiffened. "That's a bit invasive, don't you think?" "Probably. But after everything that's happened with my CFO, I needed to know I could trust you." He leaned forward, his expression earnest. "What I found only confirmed what I already knew. You're remarkable. You work 60-hour weeks at that diner to support yourself and pay off your parents' medical debt. You turned down a scholarship to nursing school because you couldn't afford to stop working. You've been taking care of yourself since you were 19, and you've never asked anyone for help." Christina's throat tightened. "You had no right—" "No, I didn't. But here's what I want to do about it." Alexander pulled an envelope from the side table and handed it to her. "Open it." Her hands trembled as she unsealed the envelope. Inside was a check with so many zeros she had to count them twice. $3 million made out in her name. "What is this?" Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "It's a thank you for saving my life." Alexander held up a hand when she started to protest. "Before you refuse, let me explain. Last night you risked everything. Your safety, possibly your life, for a complete stranger. You had nothing to gain and everything to lose. That kind of courage is rare, Christina. It's priceless. This money is nothing compared to what you gave me." "I can't accept this." She tried to hand the check back, but he wouldn't take it. "Think of it as a business investment then. I want to pay off your debt, fund your education, give you the chance to pursue the life you deserve." His eyes locked onto hers. "And I want to offer you a job." "A job?" "My company is launching a new charitable foundation focused on supporting working-class families. I need someone to run it, someone who understands the struggles these families face because she's lived them. Someone with integrity, with courage, with a heart that genuinely cares about helping others." He smiled slightly. "I can teach you the business side, but I can't teach character. That you already have." Christina stared at him, her mind reeling. 24 hours ago, she had been wiping down counters and serving pie to strangers. Now, a billionaire was offering her $3 million and a job that could change not just her life, but countless others. "Why me?" she asked finally. "You could hire anyone. Someone with experience, with credentials. Because you threw coffee at an armed robber without hesitating." Alexander's voice was quiet but intense. "Because when everyone else would have frozen, you acted. Because in that moment, you showed me exactly who you are, and it's someone I want in my life, in whatever capacity you'll allow." The last sentence hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning that extended far beyond professional boundaries. Christina felt the pull of it, the gravity of this man who had appeared in her life like a meteor, leaving a crater in all her careful plans. "I need time to think," she said finally. "Take all the time you need." Alexander rose, offering her his hand. "But while you're thinking, let me show you something." He led her through the house and out onto a terrace overlooking Lake Michigan. The water stretched endlessly toward the horizon, the setting sun painting it in shades of gold and crimson. It was the most beautiful view Christina had ever seen. "This is what I come home to every night," Alexander said quietly. "But until last night I'd forgotten how to appreciate it. You reminded me that life is precious, that every moment matters. Whether you take the money, the job, or nothing at all, I wanted to thank you for that." Christina stood beside him, watching the sun sink lower over the water. She thought about her cramped apartment, her aching feet after double shifts, the stack of bills that never seemed to shrink. She thought about her parents' dreams for her, the nursing school application she kept in her desk drawer, the life she had put on hold for so long. And she thought about Alexander Chen, this man who had everything money could buy but seemed genuinely moved by a simple act of bravery in a rundown diner. "I'll think about it," she said again. But this time, there was something different in her voice. A door opening, a possibility taking shape. Alexander smiled, and in the fading light he looked almost vulnerable. "That's all I ask." The ride home was quiet, but Christina's mind was anything but. As the convoy of SUVs wound back through the city streets, she clutched the envelope in her lap, and wondered if she was brave enough to accept not just the money, but everything else this moment seemed to be offering. Christina spent the next 3 days in a state of indecision. She went to work, served coffee, smiled at customers, and all the while Alexander's offer burned a hole in her thoughts. The check sat in her nightstand drawer, uncashed, a tangible reminder of the crossroads at which she stood. On the 4th day, she called the number on his business card. "I'll take the job," she said before she could talk herself out of it. "But not the money. I want to earn my place, not buy it." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "The money was a gift, Christina, no strings attached." "I know, and I appreciate it, truly. But if I'm going to run this foundation, I need to know I deserve to be there, that I'm not just some charity case you felt sorry for." Another pause, longer this time. "You're not a charity case. You're the most remarkable woman I've ever met." His voice was soft, almost vulnerable. "But I understand, we'll do it your way. Can you start Monday?" And just like that, Christina Torres's life transformed. She gave her notice at Rosie's. Martha cried, hugged her tight, and made her promise to visit, and traded her coffee-stained apron for a wardrobe of professional attire that Alexander's assistant arranged to have delivered to her apartment. "Consider it a uniform," Miranda had said when Christina tried to refuse. "Even soldiers need the proper gear for battle." Her first day at Nexus Technologies was overwhelming in the best possible way. The company occupied the top 10 floors of a downtown skyscraper, all glass and chrome and stunning views of the city. Christina was given an office on the 42nd floor, right next to Alexander's, with windows that looked out over Lake Michigan. "It's too much," she said, standing in the doorway and staring at the space that was now hers. Alexander appeared beside her, his shoulder brushing against hers. "It's exactly enough. The foundation is important work, Christina. It deserves proper resources." He turned to face her, his expression serious. "And you deserve to know that I believe in you, in what we're going to build together." The first weeks were a steep learning curve. Christina had never worked in an office, never managed staff, never navigated the complex world of corporate philanthropy. But she threw herself into the work with the same determination she had shown at the diner, arriving early, staying late, and learning everything she could about how to make a real difference in people's lives. What surprised her most was Alexander. She had expected a distant boss, someone who would check in occasionally and leave the actual work to others. Instead, he was a constant presence, dropping by her office to discuss strategy, inviting her to meetings with potential donors, asking her opinion on everything from foundation priorities to office furniture. "You don't have to do this," she told him one evening, when they found themselves alone in the conference room after a marathon planning session. "You're the CEO of a billion-dollar company. You have more important things to do than help me choose the right font for our brochures." Alexander leaned back in his chair, his tie loosened, his hair slightly disheveled from running his hands through it, a habit she had come to recognize as a sign of deep thinking. "Nothing is more important than this," he said quietly. "Than you." The air between them shifted, charged with something unspoken. Christina felt her heart rate quicken, felt the pull of attraction she had been trying so hard to ignore. This was her boss. This was the man who had given her a chance when no one else would. She couldn't afford to complicate things with feelings that had no place in a professional relationship. "Alexander, I know." He held up a hand, a rueful smile crossing his face. "I know what you're going to say. It's inappropriate. It's complicated. There are 1,000 reasons why this is a terrible idea." He stood, moving to the window, his silhouette dark against the glittering city lights. "But I can't stop thinking about you, Christina. I've tried. Believe me, I've tried." She should have left. Should have made some excuse, put distance between them, protected herself from the inevitable heartbreak that came from wanting someone you couldn't have. Instead, she rose and walked to where he stood, close enough to touch, but not quite touching. "I think about you too," she admitted, the words barely above a whisper. "But I'm scared, Alexander. I've worked so hard to build a life for myself, to stand on my own feet. And you're a hurricane. You came into my life and changed everything in a single night. I don't know how to be with someone like you without losing myself entirely." He turned to face her. and the vulnerability in his eyes made her breath catch. This was not the cold, controlled CEO the world saw. This was a man who had been betrayed, who had built walls around his heart, who was just as scared as she was. "I would never ask you to lose yourself," he said. "I fell for you because of who you are. Strong, independent, brave. The last thing I want is to change that." He reached out, his fingers brushing her cheek with heartbreaking tenderness. "I just want the chance to know you. All of you. Whatever pace you need, whatever boundaries you set, I'll respect them. Just don't ask me to pretend I don't feel this." Christina closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. Every logical part of her brain screamed that this was a mistake. But her heart, her traitorous, hopeful heart, had already made its choice. "One dinner," she said finally. "Outside the office, away from work, just two people getting to know each other. That's all I can promise right now." Alexander's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. "One dinner is all I need." The dinner happened that Saturday, at a small Italian restaurant Christina had mentioned was her favorite, long before she knew Alexander was paying attention to such details. He showed up without the suit, without the security detail, without any of the trappings of his wealth. Just Alexander, in a leather jacket and jeans, looking nervous in a way that made him impossibly endearing. They talked for hours. About her parents, about his father, about the dreams they had held as children, and the compromises they had made as adults. Alexander told her about his mother, who had left when he was 5 and never looked back, and how that abandonment had shaped his inability to trust. Christina told him about the nursing school application she still kept in her desk, about the guilt she carried for surviving when her parents didn't. "Why haven't you applied?" he asked, reaching across the table to take her hand. "The foundation. We could make it work. Part-time, flexible hours, whatever you need." "I don't know." She stared at their intertwined fingers, marveling at how natural it felt. "I guess I've been afraid that if I go after something I really want, I'll lose it. Like I lost them." "Christina." He waited until she looked up, his dark eyes intense and sincere. "You deserve to have dreams. You deserve to chase them. And you deserve to have someone standing beside you, cheering you on." He squeezed her hand. "Let me be that person. Please." Something shifted in Christina that night. Some wall she had built long ago began to crumble, letting in light she had forgotten existed. When Alexander walked her to her door, when he kissed her for the first time under the dim glow of the hallway light, she felt like she was finally coming home. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as if he was giving her every chance to pull away. But Christina had spent her whole life being careful, being cautious, protecting herself from getting hurt. Just this once she wanted to be brave. She wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back with everything she had been holding inside. All the loneliness, all the fear, all the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Alexander rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the moment you threw that coffee," he murmured. "You were magnificent." Christina laughed, the sound slightly unsteady. "Most people would say I was crazy. Most people don't understand that the best things in life require a little crazy." He kissed her again, soft and sweet. "Good night, Christina Torres. Dream of me." She did dream of him. But what happened next was beyond anything she could have imagined. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Christina's life. She threw herself into her work at the foundation, finding purpose in developing programs to help working families access education and health care. And every evening, no matter how late their meetings ran, Alexander would find an excuse to stop by her office, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with questions about her day, sometimes just to see her smile. Their relationship deepened gradually, each dinner adding another layer of intimacy, each stolen moment in the office building a bridge between their two worlds. Alexander was surprisingly romantic in his gestures, flowers that appeared on her desk with no note, but a knowing smile, first editions of books she mentioned wanting to read, a donation in her parents' names to the nursing school she had always dreamed of attending. "You're spoiling me," she told him one evening, as they walked along the lakefront after dinner. "I'm making up for lost time," he replied, pulling her closer. I spent 34 years building walls around my heart. Now, I want to spend every moment showing you what's inside. But fairy tales, Christina was learning, always had villains. Her name was Victoria Sterling, Alexander's ex-fiancée, a socialite whose family ran in the same circles as the Chens. She had been out of the picture for nearly a year, ever since Alexander discovered she had been feeding information to competitors while pretending to plan their wedding. But she hadn't forgotten what she lost, and she certainly hadn't forgiven. Christina first encountered her at a charity gala, one of many Alexander had asked her to attend as the public face of the foundation. Victoria materialized out of the crowd like a shark scenting blood, all sleek blonde hair and designer gowns, and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "So you're the little waitress everyone's been talking about," Victoria said, sipping champagne as her gaze traveled dismissively over Christina's rented dress. "How quaint." Christina felt her spine stiffen. "And you're the ex-fiancé who sold company secrets. How desperate." For a moment something flickered in Victoria's eyes, surprise perhaps, at finding her prey had teeth. Then the smile returned, sharper than before. "Alexander has a habit of collecting strays, but he always comes back to his own kind eventually. Enjoy it while it lasts, sweetheart." The encounter left Christina shaken in ways she didn't want to admit. She tried to push Victoria's words aside, tried to focus on the genuine connection she shared with Alexander. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it began to grow roots in the darkest corners of her heart. It didn't help that the outside world seemed determined to remind her of the gap between them. Society pages ran endless speculation about the billionaire and the waitress, with experts weighing in on how long the relationship could possibly last. Anonymous sources, Christina suspected Victoria's influence, fed the gossip mills with stories that painted her as a gold digger, a con artist, a scheming opportunist who had engineered the robbery herself. "Don't read that garbage," Alexander said, finding her one night hunched over her phone scrolling through yet another hit piece. He took the phone from her hands, tossing it onto the sofa. "They don't know you, they don't know us. But what if they're right?" The words escaped before she could stop them. "What if I don't belong in your world, Alexander? What if we're just fooling ourselves?" He cupped her face in his hands, his dark eyes burning with intensity. "Listen to me. I have spent my entire life surrounded by people who wanted something from me. My money, my connections, my name. You are the first person who has ever wanted me. Just me. That's worth more than every dollar I've ever earned." She wanted to believe him. She desperately wanted to believe that love could bridge the chasm between their worlds. But the doubts had taken hold, whispering in the quiet moments, reminding her that people like her didn't get happy endings with people like him. The crisis came 3 months into their relationship at the Foundation's inaugural fundraising gala. Christina had worked tirelessly to make the event perfect, coordinating with caterers, reviewing guest lists, practicing her speech until she could deliver it in her sleep. Alexander had been nothing but supportive, helping where he could while giving her the space to prove herself capable. But Victoria had other plans. The first hint of trouble came during Christina's opening remarks. As she stood at the podium, thanking donors and outlining the Foundation's mission, the screens behind her flickered. Instead of the planned presentation, they displayed a photograph, Christina years younger, accepting cash from a man in a dimly lit parking lot. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Christina froze, her voice dying in her throat as she stared at the image. She knew exactly what it was, a picture from her darkest days, when she had worked 3 jobs to stay afloat and had briefly, desperately, accepted an under-the-table payment from a restaurant that paid workers illegally to avoid taxes. She had quit after 2 weeks, disgusted with herself, but someone had apparently captured the moment. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victoria's voice rang out from the crowd, "allow me to present the real Christina Torres. Not a hero who saved a billionaire, but a tax-evading criminal who has been planning this con for years." The room erupted in chaos. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, donors exchanged horrified glances. Christina felt the ground shifting beneath her feet, felt her carefully constructed new life crumbling around her. And then Alexander was there. He strode to the podium, his presence commanding immediate attention. His face was calm, but Christina could see the fury burning beneath the surface. Not at her, but at the woman who had orchestrated this ambush. Victoria. His voice was ice. I should have known you'd find a way to crawl back into my life. I'm just showing everyone who your precious waitress really is, Victoria replied, her smile triumphant. They deserve to know the truth. The truth? Alexander turned to face the crowd, his hand finding Christina's and holding it tight. The truth is that Cristina Torres worked 3 jobs to pay off her parents' medical debt after they died. The truth is that she briefly took a job at a restaurant that was later found to be violating labor laws, a situation she had no knowledge of, and left as soon as she discovered it. The truth is that she is the most honest, hard-working, courageous woman I have ever known. He squeezed her hand, his eyes never leaving the audience. The truth is that 2 months ago, this woman threw scalding coffee at an armed robber to save my life. She didn't know who I was. She didn't care. She saw someone in danger, and she acted. That's who Cristina Torres is. The room had gone silent. Alexander continued, his voice carrying to every corner. If anyone here has a problem with the woman I love, the woman who has given this foundation its heart and soul, you're welcome to leave. Your donations will be returned in full. But before you go, ask yourself, when faced with danger, would you have done what she did? No one moved. No one spoke. And then slowly, impossibly, the room began to applaud. Victoria's face twisted with rage as she turned and fled the gala, but Cristina barely noticed. She was staring at Alexander, her heart pounding, his words echoing in her mind. The woman I love. He had never said it before, neither of them had. Neither of them. They had circled around the word, afraid of its weight, its implications, but now it hung in the air between them, undeniable and true. Did you mean it? She whispered as the applause continued around them. Alexander smiled, that rare, unguarded smile she had come to cherish. Every word. He raised their joined hands to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. I love you, Cristina Torres. I love your courage and your kindness and your terrible taste in coffee. I love that you challenge me and frustrate me and make me want to be a better man. I love every single thing about you. Tears spilled down Cristina's cheeks, but she was smiling, really smiling for the first time in weeks. I love you too, she said. Even though you're impossible and overwhelming, and your security detail takes up half the parking lot. He laughed, the sound warm and genuine, and pulled her into his arms right there on the stage in front of Chicago's entire social elite. The kiss they shared was neither appropriate nor professional, but Cristina didn't care. Let them watch. Let them gossip. Let them see exactly what the billionaire and the waitress had found in each other. When they finally broke apart, breathless and beaming, Alexander leaned his forehead against hers. So, he murmured, does this mean you'll stay? Wild horses couldn't drag me away, she replied, though I might reconsider if you keep buying me first edition books. My apartment is running out of shelf space. Then I suppose I'll have to find you somewhere with more shelves. His smile turned mysterious. But we can discuss that later. Right now, I believe you have a speech to finish. Cristina laughed, wiping her eyes, and turned back to the audience. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of warmth and connection. Donors approaching with renewed interest, colleagues offering congratulations and support. The foundation raised twice its target goal, and by the time the last guest departed, Cristina felt as though she had finally, truly arrived. But as they stood in the empty ballroom, surrounded by the debris of success, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. That the real tests, the ones that would determine whether their love could survive the gap between their worlds, were still to come. 6 months had passed since the gala, and Cristina had settled into a rhythm she never imagined possible. The foundation had blossomed under her leadership, expanding from Chicago to 3 other cities, helping thousands of families access the resources they needed. She had enrolled in nursing school, part-time, just as Alexander had suggested, and discovered that learning alongside her work brought a fulfillment she had never known. And then there was Alexander himself. Their relationship had deepened in ways that both thrilled and terrified her. He had given her a key to his mansion, though she still kept her own apartment. He had introduced her to his grandmother, the formidable Eleanor Chen, who had looked Christina up and down before declaring her exactly what this family needs. He had whispered promises in the dark about futures and forevers, and Christina had started to let herself believe them. But love, she was learning, didn't exist in a vacuum, and the world had other plans. The first sign of trouble came on a Tuesday morning when Alexander arrived at the office with a tightness around his eyes that Christina had learned to recognize as barely contained rage. "What happened?" she asked, following him into his office. He handed her a tablet, the screen displaying a legal document she didn't immediately understand. "My mother," he said flatly. "After 29 years of silence, she's decided to make contact, through her lawyers." Christina scanned the document, her stomach sinking as the implications became clear. Margaret Chen, the woman who had abandoned her family when Alexander was 5, was claiming rights to a portion of his late father's estate. She was challenging the will, arguing that she had been coerced into signing away her claims during the divorce. "Can she do this?" Christina asked. "Her lawyers think so. Apparently, she's been planning this for years, waiting until my father passed, waiting until the company was successful enough to be worth the fight." Alexander's hands curled into fists. "She doesn't want me. She never wanted me. She just wants the money." Christina set down the tablet and wrapped her arms around him, holding tight despite his initial resistance. "We'll fight this," she said. "Whatever it takes. You're not alone in this, Alexander." He relaxed into her embrace, his forehead dropping to her shoulder. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted, his voice rough. "I've spent my entire life telling myself I didn't need her, that her leaving was her loss, not mine. But now she's back, and all I feel is this. Rage. This hurt I thought I'd buried decades ago. You're allowed to feel hurt. You're allowed to be angry." Christina pulled back enough to look into his eyes. "But don't let her poison what we've built. That's what she wants, to destabilize you, to make you vulnerable. We're not going to give her that satisfaction." The weeks that followed were brutal. Margaret Chen proved to be as ruthless as she was calculating, using every legal maneuver available to drag out the proceedings and maximize media attention. She gave interviews painting herself as a victim, a young mother trapped in a loveless marriage, forced to abandon her son by a controlling husband. The narrative was complete fiction, but it played well in the press. Christina watched Alexander withdraw into himself, the walls that had taken so long to dismantle rebuilding brick by brick. He worked longer hours, came home later, pulled away from her touch with increasing frequency. She tried to be patient, tried to understand that he was fighting demons she could never fully comprehend, but patience had its limits. "Talk to me," she demanded one night, after he had spent 3 hours locked in his study, emerging only when she knocked on the door. "I can't help you if you shut me out. There's nothing to talk about." His voice was flat, empty. "My lawyers are handling it. I'm not talking about the lawsuit, I'm talking about us." Christina stepped closer, forcing him to meet her eyes. "You haven't touched me in weeks, Alexander. You barely look at me anymore. If you're having second thoughts about us, about me, don't." The word came out sharp, almost violent. "Don't you dare suggest that." "Then what is it? Because I'm standing here watching the man I love disappear, and I don't know what to do." Something cracked in his expression. "I'm trying to protect you," he said, his voice breaking. "My mother, she's threatened to drag you into this. She has investigators digging into your past, looking for anything she can use. I can't let her hurt you, Christina, I won't." "So your solution is to push me away?" Christina felt tears prick at her eyes, but she blinked them back. "Alexander, I knew what I was signing up for when I threw that coffee. I knew your world was different from mine, that there would be challenges I couldn't anticipate. But I chose you anyway. I choose you every single day. Don't take that choice away from me by deciding I can't handle it. You don't understand? Then make me understand. Let me in, Alexander. Let me fight beside you instead of watching from the sidelines." The silence stretched between them, heavy with years of learned self-protection, with the fear of vulnerability that had shaped both their lives. And then Alexander's shoulders dropped, and he pulled her into his arms with a desperation that stole her breath. I'm sorry, he whispered against her hair. I'm so sorry. I've spent so long believing that love meant loss, that if I let someone close, they'd only leave, like she did. But you're not her. You've never been her. And I've been treating you like the enemy when you're the only ally I've ever had. Christina held him tighter, feeling the tension slowly drain from his body. I'm not going anywhere, she promised, no matter what your mother throws at us, no matter what the press says or the lawyers argue. I'm here, Alexander. I'm staying. They spent the rest of that night talking, really talking about his fears. His mother, the child who had waited by the window every night for a year, hoping to see headlights in the driveway that never came. Christina listened, offered comfort where she could, and began to understand the depths of the wound Margaret Chen had left in her son. By dawn, they had made a decision. They would face Margaret together, not in a courtroom but in person. Alexander would finally confront the mother who had abandoned him, and Christina would be by his side. The meeting took place at a neutral location, a conference room in a downtown hotel, lawyers present on both sides. Margaret Chen was smaller than Christina expected, a delicate woman with Alexander's dark eyes and an expression of practiced fragility. She had aged well, no doubt aided by the same expensive treatments that kept society women looking perpetually 40, but there was a hardness beneath the surface that no amount of Botox could hide. Alexander, Margaret's voice trembled with rehearsed emotion, I've waited so long for this moment. Have you? Alexander's tone was ice. Because you could have reached out at any time in the past 29 years. You had my address, you had my number, you chose silence. Your father wouldn't allow... My father is dead. He's been dead for 2 years. What's your excuse now? Margaret's composure cracked just slightly. I made mistakes, I know that. But I was young, Alexander. I was trapped in a marriage I never wanted, with a man who controlled every aspect of my life. When I finally found the courage to leave, you left me. Alexander's voice rose, decades of buried pain breaking through. You didn't just leave him, Mother. You left a 5-year-old boy who didn't understand why his mother wasn't coming back. Do you have any idea what that did to me? What it's still doing to me? I thought you'd be better off. You thought you'd be better off. There's a difference. Alexander took a breath, visibly steadying himself. I'm not here to relitigate the past. I'm here to tell you that whatever you're hoping to gain from this lawsuit, it's not going to happen. My father's estate was settled according to his wishes. You signed away your rights 30 years ago, and no amount of legal maneuvering is going to change that. Margaret's eyes narrowed, the pretense of the remorseful mother slipping away. My lawyers disagree. Your lawyers are welcome to try, but I should warn you, every media outlet in this city is fascinated by our story. If you want to spend the next several years having your past examined under a microscope, be my guest. But I suspect there are things in that past you'd prefer stayed hidden. The silence that followed was electric. Margaret's gaze flicked to Christina for the first time, assessing and dismissive in equal measure. And this is the waitress I've heard so much about. Tell me, dear, what's your angle? Because I've known women like you my entire life. You don't stay with men like my son for love. Christina felt Alexander tense beside her, but she placed a calming hand on his arm. With respect, Mrs. Chen, you don't know anything about women like me. You've never worked a day in your life. You've never struggled to pay rent or worried about where your next meal would come from. You abandoned your son to pursue a life of comfort, and now you're trying to take from him what little family he has left. She leaned forward, her voice steady and strong. I'm not going anywhere, and neither is he. So whatever game you're playing, I suggest you reconsider, because you're not just dealing with Alexander anymore. You're dealing with both of us. For a long moment, Margaret simply stared. Then, surprisingly, she laughed, a cold, brittle sound. My son found himself a guard dog. How charming. She's not a guard dog, Alexander said, standing and helping Christina to her feet. She's the woman I'm going to marry, and if you ever speak to her like that again, this conversation is over permanently. They left the hotel together, Alexander's hand clasped tightly in hers. Neither spoke until they reached the car, and then Alexander turned to her with an expression of wonder and something else, something that looked like hope. You were incredible in there, he said. She made me angry. Christina shrugged. I don't like bullies. I noticed. He pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Christina, what I said in there, about marrying you. You don't have to explain. Heat of the moment, I understand." "No." He tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his eyes. "I meant every word. I know it's fast. I know we haven't even been together a year, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I want you to be my wife, Christina. I want to build a life with you, have children with you, grow old with you." He laughed softly. "Though perhaps I should wait for a more romantic moment to make this official. My mother's conference room isn't exactly the setting I had in mind." Christina felt tears threatening again, happy tears this time. "I don't need romance," she said. "I need you, and yes, Alexander Chen. Whenever you decide to ask properly, the answer is going to be yes." His smile could have lit up the entire city. "Then let's go home," he said. "We have a future to plan." But fate, it seemed, had one more test in store for them. 3 weeks after the confrontation with Margaret, Christina received a phone call that changed everything. Martha, her former boss at Rosie's diner, had suffered a heart attack. The prognosis was uncertain, and the diner, the only home Martha had ever known, was facing foreclosure. Christina drove to the hospital that same afternoon, her heart heavy with worry for the woman who had given her a chance when no one else would. Martha looked small and fragile in the hospital bed, a far cry from the robust woman who had taught Christina everything she knew about hard work and perseverance. "You shouldn't have come," Martha said, her voice weak but her eyes still sharp. "You have important work to do now." "Nothing is more important than family," Christina replied, taking the older woman's hand. "And your family, Martha. You've been more of a mother to me than my own mother was." Martha's eyes glistened with tears. "The diner. I'm going to lose it, Christina. I've been struggling for months trying to keep up with the payments, but the medical bills—" She shook her head. 40 years of my life, and it's all going to disappear." "No." Christina's voice was firm. "It's not. I'm going to help you." "Sweetheart, I can't ask you to do that. I know you have money now, but—" "This isn't about money." Christina squeezed Martha's hand. "The foundation I run, it was created to help working families exactly like you. Families who've given everything to their communities and deserve support when they need it most. You're not a charity case, Martha. You're exactly who we were designed to help." The look of hope that crossed Martha's face was worth more than any amount of money. "You'd really do that? For me?" "I'd do anything for you." Christina leaned forward, pressing a kiss to Martha's forehead. "Now rest. I'll take care of everything." When she returned to the mansion that evening, she found Alexander in his study, a velvet box open on his desk. Inside, nestled against black silk, sat the most beautiful ring Christina had ever seen, an emerald surrounded by diamonds, elegant and understated and perfect. "That's not—" she started. "It is." Alexander looked almost nervous, a rare vulnerability crossing his features. "I was going to wait for a more romantic moment, but after everything we've been through, I realized something. There's no perfect moment. There's only now, and the person you want to spend forever with." He picked up the ring and crossed to where she stood. "Christina Torres, you came into my life like a hurricane and upended everything I thought I knew about love. You showed me that courage isn't about being unafraid. It's about being terrified and acting anyway. You taught me that walls are meant to be torn down, not fortified." He dropped to one knee and Christina felt her heart stop. "I don't have the words to tell you what you mean to me. I'm not sure such words exist, but I can promise you this. I will spend every day for the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you. Will you marry me?" Christina looked at the ring, at the man kneeling before her, at the future stretching out ahead of them filled with challenges and triumphs and everything in between. She thought about the girl she had been a year ago, exhausted, struggling, convinced that happiness was something that happened to other people. And she thought about the woman she had become, strong, confident, capable of throwing scalding coffee at armed robbers and standing up to vindictive socialites and running a foundation that changed lives. "Yes," she said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "Yes, Alexander Chen, 1,000 times yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. as if it had been made for her, as if their whole story had been leading to this moment. Then he rose and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that stole her breath and promised forever. "I have something to tell you too," she said when they finally broke apart. "About Martha, about the diner." She explained the situation, watching Alexander's expression shift from concern to determination. "How much does she need?" he asked. "That's not the point. The foundation can handle it. We were created for exactly this kind of situation." "And personally? What does she need to be comfortable, to recover without worrying about money?" Christina hesitated. "Alexander, I didn't come to you for a handout. Martha wouldn't want that. She has too much pride." "Then we won't make it about money." Alexander's mind was already working, that keen business intelligence she had come to admire turning over possibilities. What if we offered her a partnership? The foundation could invest in the diner as a community hub, a place where working families can access resources and support while enjoying a good meal. Martha stays on as manager with a salary and health benefits. The diner becomes a model for what we're trying to build. Christina stared at him, overwhelmed by the elegance of the solution. "You would do that? For you?" "I would do anything." He kissed her again, soft and sweet. "Besides, I've been meaning to expand the foundation's reach, and that cherry pie really is incredible." The wedding took place 3 months later, at Rosie's Diner of all places. It had been Christina's idea, a way of honoring the place where their story began, the fluorescent lights and worn linoleum that had witnessed the moment when a waitress decided to be brave. Martha, fully recovered and firmly established as the manager of the diner's new community center, had been overjoyed to host. The guest list was deliberately small. Alexander's grandmother sat in the front row, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. Old Roy was there, still nursing his decaf in the corner booth. The foundation staff, the security team, a handful of close friends, all of them packed into the tiny diner that had somehow become the center of their universe. Margaret Chen was not invited. Her lawsuit had been quietly settled out of court, with no money changing hands, and a non-disclosure agreement ensuring her silence. She had returned to whatever corner of the world she had been hiding in, and Alexander had made his peace with her absence. Some wounds, he had learned, couldn't be healed, only accepted. Victoria Sterling had made one more appearance, crashing the engagement party with a bottle of champagne and a mocking toast. Security had escorted her out, and she hadn't been seen since. Some people, Christina had learned, were too bitter to change. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was Alexander, standing at the end of the aisle in a simple grey suit, looking at her like she was the only person in the room. What mattered was the way her heart raced when their eyes met, the same way it had raced that first night when a stranger walked into the diner with shadows in his eyes and a story she couldn't have imagined. The ceremony was brief, the vows simple. They spoke of courage and growth, of walls torn down and bridges built, of a love that had been forged in fire and tempered by trial. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the diner erupted in applause, and Martha's famous cherry pie was served to every guest. Later, as the sun set over the Chicago skyline, Alexander led Christina out to the parking lot, the same parking lot where she had thrown coffee at armed robbers, where 4 black SUVs had arrived to change her life forever. One of those SUVs was waiting now, ready to whisk them away to their honeymoon. "Any regrets?" Alexander asked, his arm around her waist as they paused to take in the moment. Christina looked at the diner, at the foundation logo now displayed proudly in the window, at the ring on her finger that represented not just love, but everything they had built together. She thought about her parents, about the dreams they had held for her that she was finally pursuing. She thought about the future stretching out ahead, nursing school, the foundation's expansion, maybe children someday. All of it possible because of one moment of impossible bravery. "Not a single one," she said, "though I do have one question. Anything." "What happened to the coffee pot, the one I threw at that robber?" Alexander laughed, the sound warm and full of joy. "I bought it from Martha. It's in a display case in my office." He pressed a kiss to her temple, a reminder that the best things in life often come from the most unexpected places. Christina smiled, leaning into his embrace. The fluorescent lights of the diner flickered behind them, that familiar, comforting rhythm she had known for years. But everything else had changed. She had changed. And as she stepped into the SUV beside the man who had become her whole world, she carried with her the knowledge that courage, once discovered, could never be lost. Alexander took her hand as the convoy pulled away, and together they watched the diner grow smaller in the rearview mirror. Ahead of them lay a lifetime of adventures, of challenges faced and conquered, of a love that had proven stronger than doubt, stronger than fear, stronger than all the forces that had tried to tear them apart. The first stars were appearing in the evening sky as they drove toward their future, and Christina rested her head on Alexander's shoulder, finally at peace. She had spent so many years believing that people like her didn't get happy endings. But here she was, married to a billionaire who loved her not despite where she came from but because of it, running a foundation that changed lives every day, on her way to a honeymoon she couldn't have dreamed of a year ago. It had all started with a pot of hot coffee and the decision to be brave. And as the SUV carried them into the Chicago night, Christina Torres Chen smiled, squeezed her husband's hand, and stepped into their new life together.